Ella had spent the entire day working on her small ranch in the outskirts of Montana. The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting long golden shadows over the fields and painting the horizon with streaks of pink and orange. She had just finished feeding the horses and was about to head inside the farmhouse when a faint, pained groan stopped her in her tracks. It wasn't coming from the horses or the usual barn cats, it was human. Her heart pounded as she rushed toward the barn. The large wooden doors creaked as she pushed them open, revealing the warm scent of hay and horses. And there, in the corner, partially hidden by a stack of hay bales, was a man. He was lying on the floor, clearly injured, his clothes torn and stained. One arm was bent at an awkward angle, and he clutched his side as if in immense pain. Ella's instinct to help kicked in before she even had time to think. "Are you okay? Can you move?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man's head lifted slightly, and he gave her a weak, tired smile. I think so," he murmured, his voice low and rough. Ella could see the strain in his eyes, the kind of exhaustion that comes not just from physical injury but from being far from safety. She moved quickly, fetching clean cloths, water, and a first aid kit from the farmhouse. Gently, she cleaned his scrapes and wrapped his wounded arm with care, wincing when he flinched. "You need rest," she said softly, helping him sit against a stack of hay. "You can stay here tonight. I'll make sure you're safe." He nodded, his eyes scanning her small, cozy barn. "Thank you," he said, though he didn't explain how he had ended up hurt and alone in the middle of nowhere. Ella noticed the way his boots and jacket looked too fine for a typical cowboy. There was a certain elegance to him that didn't quite belong to the rugged surroundings. Yet, despite his appearance, he accepted her help without complaint. Ella felt a curious mix of emotions, concern, fascination, and an inexplicable pull toward this stranger who seemed out of place but entirely present. She offered him water and a blanket, and he let her guide him to a safer corner of the barn. The horses peeked at him cautiously, snorting and shifting, sensing the tension and the new presence among them. Ella smiled, gently patting their necks to calm them. For a moment, the world outside seemed to pause. The chirping of crickets, the distant call of a hawk, and the soft rustle of the wind through the barn's wooden beams created a quiet cocoon around them. Ella realized, with a strange mix of anticipation and worry, that this encounter was the beginning of something unexpected. She didn't yet know who this man was or why he had come into her life, but in that moment, as she cared for him and saw the gratitude in his eyes, she felt that fate had brought him to her doorstep. Over the next few days, the barn became a place of quiet recovery and unexpected companionship. Ella tended to the stranger, who had introduced himself simply as Jack, though he offered no further details about his life. Each morning, she would bring him breakfast and fresh water, helping him stand and move around, guiding him gently as he tested his injured arm. Jack was careful not to burden her, but his eyes betrayed a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, a quiet loneliness that resonated with her own. Despite his guarded demeanor, there were moments when his walls slipped away. He had a way with the horses that made Ella pause in amazement. Just a simple touch or word, and even the most skittish mare would nuzzle his hand or follow his lead. It was uncanny, almost like he had spent years among them, yet his clothes, his posture, and the subtle refinement in his manners suggested a very different life. Ella found herself both curious and cautious. They spent afternoons in the barn together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing small, ordinary tasks that gradually revealed the rhythms of each other's lives. Ella would laugh at his clumsy attempts to carry a bale of hay, and he would smile, a rare, soft expression that made her heart skip a beat. At night, when the sun had dipped behind the distant hills and the sky was streaked with stars, they would sit on the edge of the barn's loft, watching the fireflies dance and sharing fragments of conversation. Jack's presence stirred something in Ella she hadn't felt in years. There was an ease, a comfort, and yet an edge of mystery that kept her intrigued. She tried not to think about it too much, but she caught herself imagining what his life might be like beyond the barn, who he really was, where he came from, and why he had ended up wounded and alone in her small corner of Montana. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a broken fence, Jack paused and leaned against a wooden post, watching her with an intensity that made her pause mid-hammer. "You've got a good heart," he said quietly. Ella blushed, unsure how to respond. You deserve better than having to deal with me," he added after a moment, his voice low. There was an honesty in him that she found disarming, a vulnerability he didn't often show. Each day, the connection between them deepened in subtle ways, the way he trusted her to help him, the way she found herself looking forward to their shared moments, and the unspoken understanding that life had a strange way of bringing people together. Ella didn't know what the future held, or who Jack really was, but she felt certain of one thing: his presence had already changed her world. The barn, once a quiet sanctuary, had become the place where two strangers, bound by circumstance, were learning the fragile, beautiful beginnings of trust and perhaps something more. The days on the ranch had grown warm and golden, and Ella felt a strange, comforting rhythm in her life. Jack had regained most of his strength, moving with confidence among the horses and helping with chores. Yet, despite their growing closeness, he still remained a mystery. His past was a shadow he carefully avoided, and Ella, though curious, respected the boundaries he silently set. There were moments, however, when his mannerisms, his precise movements, and the subtle sophistication in the way he spoke hinted at a life far removed from the dusty plains of Montana. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, a sleek, black car rolled up the long dirt driveway. Its polished body and gleaming chrome looked entirely out of place in the rustic, familiar setting of Ella's ranch. Ella froze, her heart pounding with a mixture of alarm and curiosity. Jack turned to her, his eyes reflecting a complex mix of resolve and apprehension. "It's time I tell you the truth," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Ella set down her tools, sensing the weight behind his words. Jack took a deep breath and revealed that he wasn't just a wandering cowboy, nor a simple man passing through the countryside. He was a wealthy businessman from the city, someone used to boardrooms, high-rise offices, and luxury beyond imagination. He had been hiding from a dangerous deal gone wrong, a situation that had forced him to leave everything behind and seek refuge somewhere safe. Ella's eyes widened. The man she had cared for, who had laughed with her in the barn, who had shared quiet evenings under the stars, was not who she had imagined. For a brief moment, disbelief clouded her mind. She tried to reconcile the rugged, injured man she had met with the affluent figure before her. But when she looked into his eyes, so honest, so vulnerable, she saw that this revelation did not diminish him. It only added depth to the courage, humility, and integrity she had come to admire. "I could have stayed in my world," Jack continued, "but it felt safer, freer, and more real here, with you." There was no pretense in his words, only the truth. Ella felt a rush of emotions, astonishment, relief, and an undeniable swell of affection. For the first time, she understood that the connection they shared had nothing to do with wealth or status. It was rooted in shared moments, mutual care, and the quiet understanding that had grown between them. As the sun finally sank below the horizon, bathing the ranch in soft, fading light, Ella reached out and took his hand. She realized that the man before her, Cowboy or Millionaire, was someone who had transformed her ordinary life into something extraordinary. Despite the shock, she knew one thing for certain: trust and love had been forged in the unlikeliest of places, and the bond between them was real, unshakable, and just beginning. The revelation of Jack's true identity changed the air around the ranch, but not the bond that had grown between them. Ella found herself seeing him differently, yet the admiration, affection, and trust she had developed remained steadfast. Jack, on his part, made it clear that despite his wealth and connections in the city, he wanted to remain on the ranch, working alongside her and sharing a life that felt authentic and grounded. The contrast between their worlds, hers simple and earthy, his polished and high-powered, was stark, but it only deepened their appreciation for one another. Together, they faced the delicate task of merging two very different lives. Jack's resources made improvements to the ranch possible, repairing old fences, expanding pastures, and upgrading the barn, but he never sought to overshadow Ella's independence or her way of doing things. She insisted on being involved in every decision, and he respected her judgment. Slowly, the ranch became a symbol of their collaboration, a shared dream nurtured by both of them. Evenings were spent in quiet companionship. They would ride horses across the sprawling fields, their laughter mingling with the soft neighs of the animals and the whispering wind. At night, under a sky full of stars, they would sit together by a fire, sharing stories, hopes, and the little moments that made life feel extraordinary. Jack would sometimes gaze at Ella with a quiet intensity that made her heart race, while she felt a warmth and security she had never known before. Challenges arose, of course. Jack's past occasionally caught up with him, messages, phone calls, and the threat of those who wanted to pull him back into his old life. But Ella stood by him, unwavering. She reminded him that the ranch, their shared refuge, was a place of safety and truth. And Jack, in turn, assured her that he was committed to their life together, that no wealth or danger could sever the bond they had formed. As months passed, their connection only grew stronger. The injured cowboy had become a man renewed, not just in health but in spirit, finding freedom and purpose in a life far removed from the pressures of the city. And Ella, who had once lived a quiet, predictable life, discovered courage, love, and partnership in ways she had never imagined. They built not just a home, but a shared world, grounded in trust, respect, and the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the rolling fields, Jack took Ella's hand and smiled, a quiet promise in his eyes. She squeezed his hand back, feeling a profound certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. The ranch, once a simple backdrop to daily chores, had become a sanctuary of love, resilience, and shared dreams. And under the endless skies of Montana, two lives, so different yet so perfectly intertwined, began a new chapter, full of hope, adventure, and the enduring magic of finding each other when least expected.